Lost deep in the blistering Mojave Desert, a powerful CEO finds himself trapped, his luxury SUV sinking helplessly into the burning sand. As the ruthless sun bears down and hope fades, a poor black mechanic in a battered pickup appears, offering help without hesitation. But as sweat, pride, and survival collide, neither man knows that this chance encounter will not only save a life, but change two futures forever. Before diving into this story, tell us, what's the weirdest place you've ever gotten stuck? Let's comment below. The sun over the Mojave Desert was a brutal, relentless giant, pouring down heat like an open furnace on a land that looked like it had been forgotten by the world. The sky was wide and cruelly blue, not a cloud in sight, only the long, distant hum of the earth baking under its own silence. Every bush, every rock, every grain of sand seemed to shiver under the weight of the heat. Inside a gleaming white Land Rover, Robert Sterling III gripped the steering wheel with stiff fingers, his knuckles pale against the dark leather. His tailored white shirt, perfect just a few hours ago at a luxury conference hall in Las Vegas, was now clinging uncomfortably to his back, soaked with sweat. His face, usually firm and composed like a polished marble statue, had started to crack. Beads of sweat slid down the wrinkles at his temples. The corners of his mouth tightened in visible irritation. Robert was not used to losing control, not in business, not in life, and certainly not in a place like this, where the air itself felt like it might burn his lungs if he dared breathe too deep. His GPS had calmly suggested a shortcut, one that veered off the paved highway and onto a narrow, dusty trail, barely wide enough for a single car. Ignoring the flashing warnings about unmaintained road conditions, Robert had pushed ahead, arrogance thick in his chest, convinced that no road could defeat a Land Rover, or more importantly, defeat him. But nature had a way of humbling even the proudest, and just 20 minutes into the detour, the sand under his tires turned from firm to treacherous. The front wheels had dipped slightly at first, like stepping into a soft rug. Robert, irritated, had pressed the gas harder. The tires spun, kicked up dust, and then sank deeper, the heavy body of the SUV slouching lower and lower, until the front bumper almost kissed the sand. Now, sitting in the motionless car, Robert could feel the vehicle leaning slightly forward, like a wounded beast that had given up. His phone had no signal. His water bottle was empty, discarded on the passenger's seat. His face was turning red, not just from the sun, but from a rage he didn't know how to fix. His mind, trained to calculate mergers, acquisitions, and multi-million-dollar deals, found itself utterly helpless against simple dirt. Robert tried to open the door and step out, but the heat hit him like a wall. It wrapped around his body, squeezed into his lungs, and blurred his vision. The desert stretched infinitely around him, a shimmering ocean of gold and death, offering no shade, no help, and no forgiveness. Panic began to creep in, not all at once, but like cold fingers running up his spine. He looked down the empty trail, hoping for a passing car, but there was nothing, only silence thick enough that he could hear his own heart pounding in his ears. In the distance, barely visible through the heat waves rising from the ground, a small black speck moved slowly, a truck rumbling against the emptiness. Robert squinted against the sun, hope flickering for a brief, desperate moment. Maybe, just maybe, someone was coming. But as the truck approached, as he made out its battered shape, the worn paint, and the lone figure behind the wheel, his heart dropped slightly. It wasn't the kind of help he had expected. Behind the dusty windshield of the old pickup, Malik Johnson peered ahead, squinting against the glare. His skin, dark and sun-kissed, seemed to shimmer with the heat as he leaned forward, curious and concerned. Malik wore an old blue work shirt stained with grease and a battered Dodgers cap pulled low over his brow. His truck, a patchwork of faded colors and duct tape, coughed and rattled as he pulled up beside the gleaming, stranded Land Rover. Malik's eyes, warm and full of an easy kindness, scanned the scene quickly. He took in the fine car stuck helplessly in the sand, the expensive suit crumpled in misery, the look of stubborn pride and thinly veiled fear etched into Robert's face. Malik could feel it in his bones. The man didn't trust him, not even a little, But it didn't matter. The desert didn't care about skin color, money, or status. Out here you either helped each other or you died alone. With a slow, respectful nod, Malik swung his truck into park, wiped the sweat from his brow, grabbed a jug of water from the passenger seat, nearly his last, and stepped out into the searing sun. Malik walked steadily toward the stranded SUV, the soles of his worn work boots sinking slightly into the hot, loose sand with every step, the sun hammering down on his back like a heavy, invisible fist. The jug of water sloshed quietly in his hand, half seal now, the other half he had rationed carefully for the long drive home. His face, though glistening with sweat, remained open and calm, the kind of expression that had weathered enough hard days to know that worry didn't help much, and kindness often mattered more than anything else. As he approached, Robert straightened stiffly in his seat, his entire body tense, the rigid set of his jaw and the way his hand hovered near the door lock betraying a lifetime of ingrained suspicion, a reflex stronger than logic or gratitude. Malik stopped a respectful few feet away, holding up the jug slightly like a peace offering, his voice rough but friendly, carrying easily over the dry, heavy air. "Looks like you could use some help, man. Got yourself a little stuck there, huh?" Robert hesitated, his blue eyes darting from the water jug to the stranger's sun-darkened face, reading into things that weren't there. Feeling an old, bitter discomfort rising in his chest, he swallowed it down, the dryness of his throat almost painful, and nodded curtly without rolling down the window. He cracked the door open just enough to lean out, his voice hoarse and brittle. "I don't need anything. I've called for roadside assistance. They'll be here soon." Malik smiled slightly, not mocking, just the weary smile of a man who had heard that kind of lie 1,000 times. He tipped his cap back and pointed out towards the empty desert behind him with a lazy flick of his wrist. "Brother, out here? Ain't no cell towers for miles. You're stuck and you know it, and before you roast yourself alive, maybe let me take a look. I've pulled bigger rigs than yours out of worse spots." Robert's pride battled with the growing gnawing fear in his gut. He could feel the sun chewing on the back of his neck, could feel his tongue thickening like cotton, could feel that no one else was coming. After a long, brittle pause, he gave a tight nod, almost more to himself than to Malik, and pushed the door open fully, the heat slapping him across the face like a punishment the moment he stepped out. Standing next to each other, they couldn't have looked more different. Robert, tall but slightly stooped now under the weight of the heat and his own stubbornness, his expensive clothes rumpled and useless against the desert. Malik, sturdy and broad-shouldered, built like a man who knew how to survive under hard suns and harder luck, his clothes threadbare but practical, his movements steady and economical. Malik didn't waste time gawking at the car or throwing judgmental looks. He crouched down immediately by the front tire, his fingers digging into the sand, testing the softness, muttering under his breath as he studied the situation. "Yep," he said after a moment, standing up and dusting off his hands. "You're sunk real good. This ain't just spin and pull, man. You jammed her deep. Gonna have to dig out around the tires, drop your tire pressure, maybe use my traction boards if we're lucky. Otherwise, we're in for a long afternoon." Robert blinked at him, not fully understanding, but catching the important part. Long afternoon? And something inside him wilted a little more. Malik caught the look, shook his head, and offered the jug again, more insistent now. "First things first, you need to drink. You're sweating like a faucet, and if you keel over, ain't no point digging this thing out." This time Robert didn't argue. His hands trembled slightly as he took the jug, lifting it to his cracked lips and drinking deeply, almost greedily, the water cool and life-saving, as it slid down his burning throat. Malik watched without comment, only nodding slightly when Robert, gasping, handed it back with a gruff, embarrassed thanks. Without another word, Malik trudged back to his truck, rummaged around in the battered bed, and came back with a shovel, a pair of dusty traction mats, and a tire gauge. He dropped them onto the sand with a soft thud and got to work without asking for permission, without acting like he was doing a favor, just moving with the quiet certainty of someone who knew that out here, in this hellish, empty place, survival was a matter of shared burdens, not deaths. Robert stood awkwardly by the car, uncertain, watching Malik dig into the sand with powerful, practiced strokes, the shovel biting deep and fast, the sweat pouring off his dark arms in rivers. The sun beat down mercilessly, the sand burned against their legs, and the air shimmered with invisible waves of heat, but Malik worked steadily, rhythmically, never complaining, never pausing longer than to wipe his brow and flash Robert a brief, wordless glance as if to say, "You're going to be okay, just trust me." And for the first time in a long, long time, Robert felt something stir under the layers of fear and prejudice and pride, something small and awkward and deeply human. A flicker of gratitude he wasn't sure how to express yet. But Malik wasn't looking for thanks. He just kept digging. The minutes bled into an hour under the savage sun, and Malik worked without pause, his broad shoulders flexing with each shovelful of sand he tossed aside, his hands moving with the kind of stubborn determination born from years of labor that paid little but demanded everything. Robert, unable to stand uselessly, tried half-heartedly to help, but after just a few minutes, the heat overwhelmed him and he stumbled back to lean against the SUV, breathing in shallow, painful gasps, feeling the crushing weight of the desert press harder against his chest with every passing second. Malik saw it happen out of the corner of his eye, but said nothing, only worked faster, the muscles in his arms and back slick with sweat, the sun painting his skin with a harsh, unforgiving shine. Every breath he took felt like inhaling fire, but he kept moving, kept digging, because out here stopping wasn't an option. The jug of water sat between them like a fragile lifeline, the plastic already softening under the heat, the remaining water sloshing weakly at the bottom. Malik picked it up, shook it slightly, frowned, and without a word walked over to Robert, holding it out again. Robert's hands shook as he took it, drinking deep gulps, almost apologetic now, as if he understood finally that Malik was giving away not just water, but survival itself. Malik watched him drink, his throat working painfully to suppress his own thirst, his mouth dry and cracked, the taste of dust permanent on his tongue. He forced a grin, rough and tired, and said, "Don't worry, man. I grew up in heat like this. I'm good. You need it more." Robert lowered the jug slowly, staring at Malik with something new flickering behind his weary blue eyes. Not pity, not guilt, but the first faint spark of respect struggling to catch fire. It made him feel strange and small in a way he couldn't quite name, like realizing you had been looking at the world upside down your whole life and only just now understood how wrong you'd been. Malik didn't wait for thanks. He simply dropped the tire pressure on all four wheels, moving methodically, crouching low to the ground as he worked the valve stems with dusty fingers. The SUV hissed softly with each adjustment, the sounds swallowed quickly by the endless roar of the desert heat. Once that was done, Malik unrolled the traction mats, battered pieces of hard plastic worn down by countless rescues before this one, and wedged them carefully under the front tires, packing the loose sand tight around them with his hands. Every movement was deliberate, economical, no wasted energy, no wasted words. His shirt clung to his back like a second skin, and his breath came in ragged bursts, but still he worked, a quiet testament to a kind of strength that didn't ask for attention or applause. Finally, when everything was set, Malik stood, brushing the sand from his jeans with slow, heavy slaps, his chest rising and falling like a bellows. He walked around to the driver's side door and opened it, gesturing for Robert to slide behind the wheel. Robert hesitated, the leather seat burning hot against his legs. But the silent urgency in Malik's eyes pushed him forward. He gripped the wheel with trembling hands and waited, glancing nervously at Malik standing just outside, ready to guide him. "All right," Malik said, his voice rough but steady. "Real slow, no gunning it, just ease it out. Feel the tires catch. You got this, man, we both do." Robert nodded tightly, shifting the car into gear, pressing the gas with a feather-light touch. The SUV lurched, wheels spinning slightly, then gripping, the tires biting into the traction mats, the whole heavy frame shuddering and lifting up. Inching forward like a stubborn mule, finally deciding to move, Malik shouted encouragement over the engine's roar, jogging alongside the car, his boots kicking up clouds of dust. After a few agonizing moments, the Land Rover pulled free of the pit. rolling onto firmer sand with a sudden, almost anticlimactic ease. Robert slammed the brakes, his chest heaving, his mind whirling. Malik slapped the hood lightly, his smile exhausted but triumphant, the relief on his face shining brighter than the sun itself. Robert stepped out, legs unsteady, and looked at Malik, really looked at him. For the first time, not as a stranger, not as a threat, but as a man. A good man, who had just given everything he had to help someone he didn't even know. Malik staggered slightly, his body finally protesting the heat and exertion, and Robert, without thinking, reached out to steady him, their hands clasping briefly, the contact sparking something raw and undeniable between them. In that moment, words weren't necessary. Respect, gratitude, and something deeper passed between them, unspoken but real, forged not by shared backgrounds or status, but by the simple, stubborn refusal of one man to let another die alone in the desert. And somewhere deep inside Robert Sterling III, something old and bitter cracked, just a little, letting in the blinding light of a truth he hadn't been ready to face until now. The sun had begun its slow, brutal crawl toward the horizon, casting long, sharp shadows across the sand, but the heat refused to let up, clinging to the earth and to their skin like a second, suffocating layer. Malik wiped the sweat from his eyes with the back of his arm, his movements slower now, more deliberate, every muscle in his body aching in a deep, bone-tired way that spoke of hours spent fighting both the sand and the merciless. Robert stood there awkwardly beside him, dust and sweat caking his fine clothes, the sharp creases of his expensive slacks now barely visible, his once crisp shirt hanging limp and defeated. For a long, heavy moment, neither man spoke. The only sounds, the faint ticking of the cooling engine and the endless whisper of the desert wind stirring the sand at their feet. Robert found himself looking at Malik, really looking this time, seeing the lines of fatigue etched deep around his mouth, the way his shoulders drooped under an invisible weight, the cracked skin on his knuckles, the small tremors in his hands from exhaustion and dehydration. And alongside all of that he saw something else, a quiet, unbreakable dignity, the kind of strength that wasn't shouted from rooftops or polished up for boardroom presentations, but lived quietly in the bones of a man who chose, day after day, to keep going, even when the world gave him every reason to stop. It made Robert's throat tighten painfully, made shame crawl hot and heavy under his skin in a way he couldn't hide even if he tried. Malik broke the silence first, his voice rough but light, as if he were trying to make it easy for Robert, trying to offer him an out. "You should be good now. Just take it easy getting back to the highway." "Don't trust this sand, man. It'll grab you again if you ain't careful." Robert nodded stiffly, the words catching in his throat, and for a second he didn't know what to say, didn't know how to bridge the wide, broken distance between who he had been when Malik first pulled up and who he was now, standing here feeling like a fool who had almost let pride cost him his life. Finally, after a long, clumsy pause, Robert cleared his throat and managed, "Thank you. I owe you more than you know." His voice cracked on the last word, and he hated the way it made him sound weak, but Malik only smiled. That same easy, tired smile, and shook his head like it didn't matter at all. "Ain't about owing," Malik said, his tone simple and firm, the kind of truth that didn't need polishing. "Out here we look out for each other. That's just how it's supposed to be." Robert opened his mouth, closed it again, feeling the heavy weight of all the things he should say, all the things he had been wrong about, all the assumptions he had carried in his chest like armor for so long, only to realize now that it had been weighing him down more than protecting him. He didn't know how to apologize for that, didn't know if he could even find the right words, so instead he reached into the back seat of his SUV, fumbled through the small cooler he kept for emergencies, and pulled out the last remaining bottle of water. Still cool, still precious. He offered it to Malik with both hands, a simple, silent gesture. And Malik looked at it for a moment, his dark eyes unreadable, before taking it carefully, almost reverently, as if he understood exactly what it meant, exactly how much weight was behind that small, clumsy offering. Malik twisted the cap off, took a careful sip, then handed it back without a word. A quiet, shared pact forming between them in the thick, shimmering air. For the first time in years, Robert Sterling III smiled without calculation, without reservation, a real smile that felt awkward and unfamiliar on his face, but warm and right in his chest. He extended his hand toward Malik, palm open, no longer the guarded, stiff gesture of a businessman, but the honest, grateful handshake of a man reaching out across a bridge he hadn't known how to build until now. Malik looked at the hand for a heartbeat, then grinned wide and grasped it firmly, his grip solid and strong, the two men standing there in the dying light, connected not by necessity or obligation, but by something much harder to name. Respect? Humanity? Maybe even the fragile beginnings of friendship. And as the desert wind rose around them, carrying the dust and the heat and the quiet magic of second chances, Robert felt something inside him shift. Slow, deep and permanent, like the first cracks of green breaking through dry earth after a long, merciless drought. The city lights of Los Angeles flickered like distant stars against the velvet dusk as Robert Sterling III pulled into the sweeping driveway of his hillside estate, the polished black gates sliding open on silent tracks to welcome him home, the marble columns and manicured lawns, the gleaming windows and the faint, cool scent of water from hidden fountains. All of it should have felt reassuring, comforting, a return to the familiar world of privilege and control he had built for himself brick by brick over decades. But as Robert stepped out of his freshly washed Land Rover and looked up at the grand house, he felt a strange emptiness settle into his chest, as if all the stone and glass and wealth were suddenly too cold, too large, too hollow to fill the space inside him that had cracked open out there in the desert. The events of the day clung to him like a second skin, the blistering heat, the rough hands digging into the sand, the quiet generosity of a man who had asked for nothing and given everything. Robert moved through the house in a daze, barely noticing the soft murmurs of the household staff, the perfectly set dining table, the unopened bottle of aged wine waiting by the door. None of it seemed to matter anymore. Not in the way it once had. He climbed the stairs to his study, a vast room lined with dark oak bookshelves and heavy leather furniture, and sank into the chair behind his desk, his fingers drumming absently against the smooth wood. For a long time he sat there, staring out at the glittering sprawl of the city below, the memory of Malik's weary smile, his cracked hands, his easy strength playing over and over in his mind. Robert had spent a lifetime calculating value, the worth of companies, the cost of acquisitions, the price of loyalty. But what Malik had given him today could not be measured in dollars or shares. It was something deeper, something priceless, and for the first time in his life, Robert realized he didn't want to simply write a check and move on. He wanted to do something real, something that would honor the quiet dignity of the man who had saved his life without expecting a damn thing in return. The idea came to him slowly, almost shyly, like a seed pushing through cracked earth after a long drought, and once it rooted, it grew with fierce determination. Robert picked up his phone, his fingers surprisingly steady, and began making calls, barking sharp orders to his assistant, to his legal team, to a handful of trusted associates who owed him favors and wouldn't dare say no. The wheels of power, once set in motion, turned quickly, and by the next afternoon everything was ready. 1 week later, on a clear, bright morning, Malik Johnson stepped out onto the cracked porch of the small, weather-beaten house he shared with his mother, blinking in confusion at the sight of a gleaming black limousine parked at the curb, its polished surface reflecting the sunlight like a mirror. A tall man in a dark suit stood by the car, holding an envelope in one hand and wearing a tight, professional smile. Malik approached cautiously, wiping his hands on his jeans, the old instinct of distrust rising unbidden in his chest. But the man only handed him the envelope with a small bow of his head and said, "Mr. Sterling asked me to deliver this personally." Malik frowned, puzzled, and tore the envelope open with calloused fingers. Inside was a set of keys, a thick packet of official papers, and a handwritten note in Robert's sharp, precise handwriting. "You gave me a second chance. Let me give you one too. The garage is yours. Free and clear, full ownership, full freedom, and a little something extra to take care of your family like you took care of me. Robert." The address listed on the deed was in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, a fully equipped auto repair shop, renovated and stocked with top-of-the-line tools ready for business. Along with it, a trust fund had been set up in Malik's name, enough to ensure that his mother would receive the best medical care money could buy, no matter what the future held. Malik stood there in stunned silence, the paper trembling slightly in his hands, the weight of it all pressing down on him in a rush so strong it stole his breath. He looked up at the limousine, at the driver waiting patiently by the door, and somehow he knew, even without seeing Robert's face, that the man sitting inside wasn't paying off a debt, wasn't buying redemption, but was offering something real, something rare. With a slow, disbelieving laugh that bubbled up from deep inside his chest, Malik shook his head, feeling the tight band of struggle and fear that had wrapped around his heart for so long begin to loosen, just a little. He glanced up at the wide blue sky overhead, the same sky that had beaten down on them both in the desert, and whispered a quiet, rough prayer of thanks, not just for the gift he held, but for the simple, stubborn goodness that had led him to stop for a stranger in the first place. And somewhere in the back of the limousine, watching from behind tinted glass, Robert Sterling III smiled. A real smile, warm and unguarded, knowing that for once in his life he had gotten something truly, deeply right. In the weeks that followed, Malik and Robert found their paths crossing more and more, not by accident, but by a shared, unspoken understanding that what had begun out there in the brutal heat of the Mojave was meant to grow into something larger, something lasting. Together they stood shoulder to shoulder at the opening of the new garage, not just shaking hands for the cameras, but making quiet promises to each other and to the people who came through the doors seeking help, promising that no one who needed a hand would ever be turned away. They started small, fixing cars for single mothers who couldn't afford repairs, offering free classes on auto maintenance for high school kids trying to find their way, reaching out to veterans, to the homeless, to anyone who needed a second chance, the way Robert once had, the way Malik had never hesitated to give. And as the sun dipped low over the city skyline, painting the streets in gold and amber light, the two men stood side by side, not as a rich man and a poor man, not as black and white, but simply as brothers, bonded by dust, by sweat, by survival, and by the simple, stubborn belief that kindness, once given freely, could change the world, one small act at a time. And so they smiled, rolled up their sleeves, and got to work, together. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.